Greetings all, Shane Bruce, Restomod Daisy, and today we're going to do a little video to cover a question I got in one of my emails or on one of the comments on one of the videos we've got up about a fellow who is really in need of a rear sight for a Daisy Model 99. And the gun you're looking at is, of course, a Daisy Model 99. To give you an idea of what he's missing is this little gizmo, and that is the rear sight. Nice elemental piece of engineering. It's about a 16 gauge steel L frame. It's got a knurled knob. This is kind of cool. It's got a knurled knob that has an aperture drilled through the middle of it. You can see that right there, a little hole to look through. Let me see if I can get my finger out of the way. And that is threaded and fits on a nut on the back side of the assembly in a slot. So when you put this thing together, you stick the nut on, you take your Peep sight, this is the actual sight, you run it down here, hold it, excuse me. Now on the Daisy factory product, there's also this small washer to help the Peep sight grab. Thread your Peep sight in, and then you have the ability, because the way that it's constructed, to adjust the height. So that is an elevation adjustment that the sight is capable of making. And since the Daisy 99 is a target gun, that's kind of critical. The 99 also has a rear sight platform tack welded to the back of the receiver, and the rear sight sits on it like this. It's held in place by a screw. This is the hard to find, next to impossible to find, Daisy factory screw. Now the guy who's got the problem with the sight actually has this piece. He's just missing all of this piece. Now, I don't have one of those as a separate item that isn't put on a gun, so I wasn't able to help him out with the spare parts requirement. But I got thinking about it, and I was like, you know, it's not that hard to make one of the rear sights as long as you know how to try to make this screw. If you got the screw, then go ahead and make the rest of it. So anyway, as you can see on the top of the receiver, it's also a slot, so that allows you to give yourself a left-right windage adjustment. So it's truly an adjustable sight. It works really well with these Daisies. It's one of the neatest pieces of the gun, I think. Anyway, so you've got a Daisy 99. It's got a front sight, but you ain't got a rear sight. What can you do? Well, you can take the Restomod approach, and you can just make one. This is a Restomod cheap Peep rear sight. It's manufactured out of a couple of common household ingredients, primarily a U.S. quarter, some 16 gauge steel, and a quarter 20 nut and bolt. So we're going to take it all to pieces right now. It doesn't have the slots on the side. Now you could fabricate those by allowing a little bit extra steel on the upper part of the shank and then just bending it over. But all I did was to build this piece was to get an idea of how wide it had to be. So you put it in your caliper and you come up with like 0.624, a little over ½ inch wide, and then you get a quick measurement, and that's about an inch, and this is about 3/4 of an inch. So about a 2-inch strip of steel that's a little bit more than a ½ inch wide would be all you would need to make this assembly. And so I took some 16 gauge steel, some of this stuff, and I cut myself a strip that was 0.64 wide, and then I started marking the location of the slots by utilizing the original sight for a guide. And it's a real simple matter of just laying it out. So you take your slot and you lay it out so that the slots match in both dimensions. All right. So you drill this slot out, you drill that slot out, you file it a touch. You might want to file the outside, you might want to sand it some, bring a profile shape that you want to see into it. You're not limited by what Daisy did, but as you can see on my reproduction effort, it's very, very, very influenced. The trickier, probably the trickiest aspect of this was you will need to leave a small bit at the end because you're going to try to hammer that over and to get this lip. And the reason you want the lip on there is because on the factory site, on the plate that it sits on, the lip helps keep the sight from getting twisted left or right. So that's kind of like an aid for you to get this mounted. So having that little lip there is kind of important, but it certainly isn't tough to do. As you can see, the fabricated sight, we managed to get that to happen as well. So the next step is to get a 1/4-20 nut and bolt. I used a Phillips bolt because it's already pre-centered, so when you do the drill through operation for the aperture, you don't have to worry about finding center on it. It just makes it a little bit easier. And as you can see, the modified bolt, this is what we started with, this is what we ended up with. We reduced the amount of shank length on it because we didn't need it, and we flattened the top out so that it would nest up against our cheap Peep rear a little better, like so. And it's got a fairly thin aspect. Now, if you use a 1/4 like I did, you're going to run into one problem that I didn't anticipate, and that's a 1/4 is a very large diameter and will not allow you to use the full elevation adjustment on the sight. So if you go with a 1/4, you probably want to section it if you've got to drop the sight all the way to the bottom elevation. But if it doesn't really matter, it doesn't really matter. You can also use, don't have to pre-drill your own or drill your own 1/4. You can just get a 1/4-inch washer and use that instead. You know, the aperture is the important part. The washer just serves to block unneeded light out of your sight. So when you get done, you'll have a bracket that will fit the gun and will fit your sight. You will have fabricated one of these by drilling the center with an appropriate sized bit, and then if you decide to go the 1/4 route, you can drop that in, stick that on, take a 1/4-20 nut, spin it on the back. One of the reasons I used a 1/4 was because I wanted to be able to spin the sight slightly. You know, I mean, if I wanted to move it, it's always nice to have something to grab to loosen it up and move it up and back. But because we don't have the slots, it's not as convenient as the factory sight, but it will work just as well as the factory sight, and it will install exactly the same as the factory sight. So there you have it. If you can't find a Daisy factory Model 25 rear sight, you can make one with a 1/4-20 bolt, 1/4-20 nut, some 16 gauge steel bent, and a couple of slots machined. You'll be good to go. If you've got the magic mounting screw. If you haven't got the magic mounting screw, we'll have to do some figuring out to get what the pitch and thread on that is. I'm not quite certain, but it's a nice fine thread. So that's all we've got for you today, kids. If you're interested in making a Daisy model adjustable rear sight, now there's a footprint for you. You can use that as a guide. This is Shane Bruce with Restomod Daisy signing off.